everybody, I'm Captain Floofers, and welcome to belated, I guess you could say, episode of the Squeeze the World video podcast. I'm by myself today. Scheduling conflicts have more or less made it so that I couldn't have recorded this earlier. Today is, by the way, is Sunday, December 29th, which is as close to the end of the year as I can really get to make an end-of-year video. But because of scheduling conflicts, we haven't been able to do anything like this, before now, and we won't be able to do this in the coming week, within the first week of the year. And if we did it later, it would just seem really, really, really ill-timed. I mean to say, ill-timed, kind of like our E3 video, which was the last thing that went up. But I don't want to make a habit of that. I already know that we're not really doing this as a regular thing anymore. It just kind of either a spur-of-the-moment thing, or if I really want to do something special. This kind of falls into the latter. I'm not really going to have any news articles for you today. The last couple of months, I would say, after basically the past couple of months here, but for a while after the last episode of the podcast that we did, there really wasn't much that we could talk about, and that's why we felt kind of uninspired to do that. And then, stuff did start coming up, but by that time we were just kind of in the habit of not doing it. But, there was, I'm not really going to go into full details, but there was, all that bullshit with Activision Blizzard firing someone or withdrawing prize money, official prize money for a tournament that he won for political reasons, and then tried to make them seem apolitical by issuing a fake and hollow apology for nothing. That's a thing. Fallout 76 has been, for whatever reasons, coming up again. I'm not going to go into details about this, because quite frankly, I am sick of talking about Fallout 76, but the past couple of months, Fallout 76 has realized that it's not getting any attention for stupid shit that it's doing, and it started doing stupid shit again. Bethesda is just a joke at this point. And I guess that's the only way that they can get attention, so they keep doing stupid things. But I'm not going to go into too much detail. And of course, Star Citizen still isn't out yet. From what I hear, it is an alpha, though. So I guess they've got that going for them, but with all of the time that they've been developing this game, and all of the money that they've taken developing this game, it should be out by now. I stopped caring a long time ago. I mean, I didn't stop caring enough to keep this running gag going, but you know what I mean. So what I'm going to be focusing on in this episode of the podcast, unfortunately, again, Greg was not able to be here. With this short notice. I kind of came up with the idea for this within the past couple days, because I really wanted to do a year-end thing like we did last year, and there are a couple of traditions that I want to keep up. There's one tradition where I started keeping, about halfway through last year, I started keeping track of all of the games that I'd beaten that year, and it was really easy, because every time I beat a game, it was a really big deal for me, because I've been focusing so much on my backlog, and it just meant that I was just that much closer to getting my backlog done. And every time I did so, I would send Greg, and I also send these to Jordan. Jordan. I send them to Jordan as well. Basically, a screenshot of one of the game clear splash text from Kamen Rider X-Aid. Here's a picture of what here's the picture I sent up. Just kind of putting that in post there. But yeah, that's what I send to them every time I beat a game. And because I had started doing that prior to last year, I was able to keep better track of it. And I had actually used that to keep myself on track, seeing how many games I could beat that year. And last year I beat 50 games, which is no small feat. And I actually kept up the tradition this year, seeing if I could beat 50 games. And for fun, I also kind of kept track of Greg's as well. But last year I also was so proud of that I had read off the list of games that I'd cleared. And I kind of want to do that again, Give me this. Let me toot my own horn for a bit, But the other tradition I wanted to keep up was the Floopl Awards, which is of course our take on the Game of the Year stuff, and we really didn't have a chance to film that either. And that is because I said last year it was the first annual. I want to keep it annual. I don't want to turn myself into a liar. I keep turning myself into a liar, and it makes me mad. So I actually got the same categories together from last year, and I actually do have Greg's input on that as well. So I will be reading off Greg's picks for each category as well as my own. Maybe an honorable mention here and there. And well, let's have some fun. This may not be a traditional Squeeze the World podcast setup, but considering the circumstances, I think we're still going to have a good time. So, but let's start off with the games cleared now. Apologies, I should say, for the lighting. You might see reflections in my glasses and whatnot because I'm looking at a computer screen. I got my phone down here. But, I don't have any lights over here to really counteract that, so that kind of sucks. So I did not clear 50 games this year. So that's going to remain my total, my record, I should say. I did clear 40 though. At least I put down that I cleared 40. Some of these I kind of fudged it. Some of these I basically try to keep them games that I hadn't cleared before, but there were instances where I counted remakes just to kind of buff that up. And considering that I also have been coming up with a lot of the qualifications for this, like last year I counted a multi-episode Telltale game is 5 games. So the last one, I just really wanted to end at least on I had a round number in my sights. I was like at 38 or 39. And like the 2 games that I had up next that I wanted to play, I wasn't playing enough of them for it to really register before I got to do a special on it. So I just kind of fudged the last entry. I'll get to it when I get to it, but I wanted to end on 40. So as far as I'm concerned, I end on 40. Greg cleared 11, which is still, considering the, he's got a lot more going on than I do. So games that I cleared, the first game I cleared, I'm not gonna do the first game, the second game every time, but like the first game really sticks out to me because I actually cleared that New Year's Day this past year. That was Bayonetta 2. Basically, I'd started Bayonetta 2 before the end of the year, and as you do. Then I have the Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker HD for the Wii U. I had beaten Wind Waker before, but this is a different enough version, I think, that I decided to count it. I beat Yoshi's Island after that. It's the Game Boy Advance version. I had the Ambassador program Virtual Console downloaded on my 3DS. Secret of Evermore, which I thought I beat Illusion of Gaia first. Well, I beat Secret of Evermore was the next one apparently. And I actually had the cartridge for that. I have a the Superboy, which is the portable Super Nintendo. I played that on there. Deadly Premonition Director's Cut, which we beat as an LP. That took months of going back and forth to it. Illusion of Gaia was the next game I beat on the Super Nintendo. Mischief Makers on the N64. Rayman 3D, which is the remake of Rayman 2 on the 3DS. I didn't care for that one very much. River City Ransom, Virtual Console on the 3DS. Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door on the GameCube. And then from there, after that was when I hacked my DS and sideloaded a bunch of stuff onto it. So the next one I beat, I have down as Rockman Mega World, but it's Mega Man: The Wily Wars. You know me. The reason I put that down as a game that I beat, at its core, it is a Sega Genesis remake or remake collection of Mega Man 1, 2, and 3. And I've beaten all 3 of those games a bunch, but there's also that other mode. Once you beat all 3 of those games, you have that other mode, Wily's Tower, which is like its own brand new experience thing. So that's why I counted it there. After that, I had Final Fantasy V Advance. First time playing that, a lot of fun. The Pokemon trading card game on the Game Boy Color. obviously through the 3DS. Most of these were through the 3DS. We had Game Ground on the Switch, which we beat on the channel. Castlevania Bloodlines, originally released for the Genesis. I played that side-loaded on my 3DS. Quake, the very first Quake, I have that on my 3DS in a way. But yeah, Phantasy Star, the Sega Ages version on the Switch. Transformers Devastation for the PS4, we beat that as an LP on the channel. Poochie and Yoshi's Woolly World for the 3DS, which I was actually very surprised how good that game was. I wasn't expecting much out of it, but there you go. I beat the NES version of Rampage. You wouldn't think that Rampage, has an ending to it because it's an arcade game, but it does. Once you've cleared the entire map, you get a credit sequence, and I was counting that. And I think it just loops anyway, but still. Crystalis, originally on the NES. That's available on the Switch Online now if you want to try it. It's a very, very underrated game. I liked it quite a bit. R-Type Deluxe, which is the Game Boy Color remake of R-Type and R-Type 2. And they just kind of, the deluxe playthrough mode of it just kind of stitches the two together and makes it like one long game. I actually had quite a bit of fun with that. Sky Blazer on the Super Nintendo, not Soul Blazer, Sky Blazer, not the one that's related to Illusion of Gaia. Sky Blazer is a very rare, hard to find, I guess nowadays, any Super Nintendo game. I first saw about it on the Game Grumps. It actually looked really fun, and it is. There were some parts of it that kind of looked iffy to me when I watched the Grumps play it way back in the day, but it's actually very, very good. I highly recommend it if you can get your hands on it, or if you played a ROM like I did. Daikatana, not the... Okay, so technically it is still Daikatana. I did not play like the infamously bad version of it. I played the actually surprisingly better action RPG Game Boy Color version of it. I don't think I would play it again. But it was alright. It wasn't bad for a Final Fantasy Adventure clone, I should say. Final Fantasy VI Advance. Hadn't played Final Fantasy VI anymore. Hadn't played Final Fantasy VI before this. I will actually get to my thoughts of that during the Floopl Awards. That could go either way. Then after that was Final Fantasy XIV, the Shadowbringers expansion. And yes, I am counting that because it has all its own story and everything. Fantastic expansion. If you haven't played Final Fantasy XIV up to this point, I know it is a subscription-based MMO, but I would definitely say it is worth playing through the game to just on its own to play Shadowbringers. It was that darn good. And I will mention that again in the Floopl Awards later. Dragon Quest Builders 2, again, fantastic game. Played that on the Switch. Quest RPG Brian's Journey, which is an official demake of Quest 64 made for the Game Boy Advance. It is technically a better game in that it's a lot more complete. The story's a lot more fleshed out. I still really like Quest 64. I'm one of those people, but Quest RPG, yeah, not bad. I would recommend trying it out. Mega Man 0, 2, 3, and 4. I have them listed separately, but I have the Mega Man 0 DS collection. And I had beaten the first game on the collection. Like I have the first game as well on just on the Game Boy Advance, and then I got the collection later. And I beat the first game a couple of years ago. And I just never got around to playing through the other three. So, or was it last year I beat 0, 1? Either way, I went through 0, 2, 3, and 4. I don't like them as much as the first Mega Man 0 game, but they are all consistently good. So at the very least, they got that going for them. Shovel Knight Spectre of Torment, which was at the time the latest expansion on Shovel Knight. I played that on the 3DS. Of course, now King of Cards is out, and I am currently playing that. But regardless, we've got Yakuza Kiwami, the remake of the original Yakuza game, originally released on the PS2. Kiwami was released on the PS4. It's the first time I played through a Yakuza game. I got it for free off PlayStation Plus, and I loved every second of it. And I was initially like at the time, like I was kind of getting into Shenmue as well. Like I wasn't playing Shenmue at the time. I was watching stream archives of Shenmue, and I'm like, well, I don't know if at the time I was like, I don't know if I would really want to be playing Shenmue in a post Yakuza world, so I'll play Yakuza instead. And I really liked Yakuza. I am planning on playing through the rest of the games on the PS4, but I'll get back to Shenmue in a second. Of course, The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening on the Switch. I played through this twice, technically. I mean, I only counted it as one clear when I cleared it after I got it. And then we played through the hero mode on the channel. That was like the last big LP that we did, I think. Then I counted Dragon Quest XI S Echoes of an Elusive Age Definitive Edition for the Switch. So I played through the entirety of Dragon Quest XI again because it's that good. Mother 3 for the Game Boy Advance. As you know, I have the cartridge for Mother 3. That's why I turned my head, because I went to look at it. But I did play the translated ROM, side-loaded on my 3DS. I counted Luigi's Mansion on the 3DS. Even though I played Luigi's Mansion many, many times on the GameCube, I was actually one of the few who was very excited to get it on the 3DS. And I actually just kind of bought it on a whim on the 3DS, because I'm like, it's about time I start just kind of like filling out my backlog of things that I want to have on my 3DS before I decide to, finally just stop buying games for it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm really excited to play on the 3DS. Everyone's a hater, because one of the big things, and I apologize for digressing here, one of the big things that really got under my skin was when it was released, or when it was announced that it was going to be released on the 3DS, everyone complained because, oh no, they need to make this for the Switch. And I'm like, I'm glad that they are still supporting my favorite system of all time. And now I turned myself into a hypocrite because I played it on the 3DS and it's not great on the 3DS. It's still fine. It's still serviceable, but the controls are not good for the 3DS. And I'm with everyone else where I would say I would rather have it on the Switch in that case, but I still have it on the GameCube, so if I'm going to play it on a console like we played on the TV, whatever. It's whatever. After Luigi's Mansion, I have down Shenmue. So, I got a lot of Shenmue hype around the time Shenmue 3 came out. Because I had been following Brutal Moose playing it. Brutal Moose still hasn't cleared it on his channel. I don't know if he's been playing it in his spare time because he really wants to play it in his spare time, but I first experienced Shenmue 1 and 2 watching it on his channel. And then I saw, I was watching Shenmue 3 being played, and I was still of the mind where I'm not going to buy this, although I am kind of tempted to at least try it myself, even though, again, Shenmue in a post-Yakuza world. But there's just something about it that made me want to play it. And I saw an article on Push Square showing that on Amazon, the game was Shenmue 3, possibly due to poor sales, because, let's face it, this was a crowdfunded game that was crowdfunded by the people who really wanted to play it, and those people who really wanted to play it, they got what they wanted, and, I guess all the people who had it on the PS4 were the people who wanted it on the PS4, and it went down from, I think it was still a full price game, $60 at retail, and it was cut down to like $35 at the time. And I'm like, at that cheap a price, that would be a good jumping off point for it, but I still don't know. And then I saw, because I was looking at the Amazon link, and I saw that the remaster disc, which has 1 and 2 on it for the PS4, was cut in half. That retails for $30 and was on sale for $15. So what I did was my mom. I was on the phone with my mom, and she asked me if there's anything I wanted for Christmas. I was like, yeah, I've been looking at these games. So rather than order them through Amazon, get them to their house in Florida, wrap them up for me, and then send them to me in Virginia, They just went and ordered them on Amazon and shipped them directly to me and said, "We have other wrapped presents that will be coming to you that you can open on Christmas. You can just go ahead and these are still Christmas presents from us, but you can just go ahead and use them now if you want to." So I played through Shenmue earlier this month, and I'm working on Shenmue 2 now. But Shenmue 1, I did clear that, so that's there. And one of the things that Shenmue got me into playing was Space Harrier. So I got the 3DS version of Space Harrier, the 3D version, because that was the with difficulty settings and stage selects and whatnot. That was the only way that I knew that I could beat Space Harrier because I suck at it. So I beat the 3D version of Space Harrier on 3DS. And then the last game I beat is the one that I fudged the most. Because the way that I had planned things out, I'm like, okay, so my 40th game, it's either going to be Shenmue 2 or it's going to be King of Cards, the last Shovel Knight game that came out. And then just like, because work had been so stressful over the peak delivery season, I just like, it wasn't even turning on Shenmue 2. I was just using my TV to watch YouTube. I had been getting caught up with a lot of Pro Jared's D&D December stuff. I had been watching that, and I was just like, I don't really want to turn on my PS4, so I never got to play Shenmue 2. And despite the fact that I had been playing King of Cards here and there at work during my lunch breaks, my 3DS was more or less just staying in my bag, and I hadn't been bothered to take that out, so I really wasn't making any progress in King of Cards. And when it got to it, at work, I just stopped playing King of Cards because there was another game that I'd been playing that I wouldn't normally be able to play if I hadn't gotten custom firmware on my 3DS to bypass region locking, but that was Theater Rhythm Dragon Quest, a Japanese-only follow-up to Theater Rhythm Final Fantasy using Dragon Quest music, which, obviously, being a Dragon Quest game at the time, well, I mean, we had still been getting heroes and builders and stuff. Oddly enough, this didn't sell great in Japan, so they figured it's not going to sell well in America, so they just didn't bother. And, so I'm like, I mean, this was like last week when I did this, too. I was like, look, this is the game that I'm playing. I'm going to come up with a clear qualification for it, meet that qualification, and then count it. So I did. I cleared out all of the challenge modes, and that's my game. That's my 40th game clear was Theater Rhythm Dragon Quest. So I went through that list a lot longer than I expected to, but that's usually what happens when we have these special things. They usually end up being like an hour or more. So sorry about that, but so Greg's list of games, like I said, he cleared 11 games this year. And the first game he cleared was Marvel's Spider-Man for the PS4. This is actually a game he got me for Christmas, I think, last year. I still haven't had a chance to play it yet, but it looks really good. It was a game that I had on my radar anyway, so there's that. He beat Celeste on the PS4, which is an indie kind of Super Meat Boy-esque jump-around platforming game that's really, really hard that I personally wouldn't really have looked at it, but he really enjoyed it. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. He had a blast with that game, from what I understand. He actually beat this when he was on vacation one time. He brought a Switch with him. Dark Souls 2, Scholar of the First Sin. I think this was a paid expansion of Dark Souls 2. I'm not a Souls expert. I really don't have his kind of input on these things. I'm just kind of like reading them off and going with what I'm going with, but it was a major. I think it was a major paid expansion for Dark Souls 2, and he cleared that the first time. Resident Evil 2, the remake on the PS4. I actually watched him play the beginning of that. I don't think that was like his main run of that he did, but a lot of people really seem to enjoy that. And it's not hard to see why. I mean, I'm not a big Resident Evil fan. I'm not a big fan of playing survival horror games. I'm more a fan of watching them. And I have watched Let's Plays and stuff, and it looks like a very solid game. So, yeah, there you go. Gain Ground on the Switch again. We actually cleared that together, so that's why I wrote that down here, because I actually kept these going over the course of the year too. I've been keeping track of them on my own volition. Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice, many people's game of the year this year. It's that Souls-like game, what takes place in feudal Japan and has the giant gorilla and whatnot. I actually watched him beat this game. We actually recorded that, but then the share play settings on his PS4 messed up, and we weren't able to. It only had like the last 15 minutes of the session, so that sucked. But I did actually watch him play that, and it looks very, very hard. Not something that I would be into personally, but it does look like a good game nonetheless. Super Mario 3D Land on the 3DS. I know that he had 3D World on the Wii U as well. But yeah, it's a decent enough game on 3DS. Death Stranding was a big one. Because there was obviously a lot of time in between these, and he seemed very, very elated that he had cleared Death Stranding. I'll get a little bit more into Death Stranding when we get to the Floopl Awards. But I played the beginning of Death Stranding. We have that Twitch VOD. If you can watch that, if you don't mind the audio getting desynced about like a half hour in. But I can understand why people like the game. I didn't think it was the greatest myself, but I understand why people like it. And Blasphemous on the PC. I'll be completely honest, I don't know what that is. I'm gonna look it up real quick. Oh, right. It's that, it's like a mix between a Souls game and a Metroidvania. Okie dokie. So those are the games that we cleared this year. So, good amount. I don't know if I'm ever going to beat that record of 50 myself. But hey, who knows what next year will bring. Because, if games continue to be this uninteresting for me, as far as, day one buys, even if I'm going into like a one-way ticket to RPG City here, yeah, anything can happen. So, half an hour in, at least according to my raw footage here, and it's finally time to bring about the Floopl Awards, second annual Floopl Awards, Floopl Awards for 2019. This is, again, our take on the Game Awards or whatever other awards that people come out with on their big games journalism websites. But chances are good that you wouldn't necessarily see our picks on most of the publications, because games journalism publications, because they're just too busy yanking the cranks of the major game industry. So anyway, let's get started. So these are going to be the same categories that we did last year, and we're going to start off with best ongoing game. So basically games that didn't necessarily come out this year but are still being supported, people still play them. Mostly live services. MMOs will count as well, as long as they keep getting expansions. They're going to keep being supported. So yeah. So I'm going to start off with Greg's, and then go into mine for each of these, because mine will probably tend to be a little bit more long-winded because I'm speaking, from my own experiences. Greg, I'm just kind of going off, the whatever side notes he may have sent me, based on his picks. But anyway, Greg's choice for best ongoing game is Dead by Daylight. And he says, as much as I shit on it, it's the only live service game that I play. And yeah, that is accurate. It's probably the game that, as far as I can tell, he plays the most. I know he plays it a lot with his sister and her husband. He's actually, oddly enough, gotten his mom to play it. It still baffles me that his mom plays video games these days. I don't know. I've known his family for over 20 years, and I wouldn't have thought that his mom would be into playing Dead by Daylight these days. But it's a thing, and it's not necessarily anything that I'm into. I have watched him play Dead by Daylight, and it's entertaining to watch him play. I'm just not a big competitive guy personally. but yeah, he seems to he enjoys it, and I can understand how it could be considered enjoyable. It's just that, from what I understand, the developers make a lot of questionable decisions, with keeping it up. But hey, as long as people are still playing it and people are still enjoying it, who am I to argue? Of course, my pick for best ongoing game is different. It is Final Fantasy XIV, same as last year. But as I said before, now, moreover, I guess I would say, because Shadowbringers came out this year, um, you know, we knew that Shadowbringers was going to be good, but we didn't think it was going to be as good as it actually is. I was blown away, with the setting. I loved the story. The soundtrack is the best in the game, and some of it is a little bit memey, Lahi anybody, but um, it is very, very well done. Post game stuff, not so much. I don't like Eden. I played the first patch's worth of additional story, and it wasn't great. I actually, one of the things I really like is the trust system now, because I have social anxiety when it comes to these kind of games, and um, it really helps being able to play through the story based dungeon with NPCs, and it allows me. I think I like this better as a way to learn dungeon mechanics and such. I still didn't like a lot of the trials very much, especially Titania. Um, but when all is said and done, it's a fantastic. It's a fantastic expansion. I think it's worth going through the rest of the game alone just to play it. So Final Fantasy XIV, again, is going to be my pick for best ongoing game of 2019. So last year when we got to this point, Greg had pilfered a best esports game category, which I kind of abandoned and did my own thing. And this year we've just decided to go for the against the whole esports thing, and we're just going to be going. This is going to be like the official, just full on second category. The official second category of the Floopl Awards is best port or remake. And Greg's pick was Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening on the Switch. He says that RE2 on PS4 was cool, but Link's Awakening was perfect. And of course, if you know me, I'm not going to think any differently about that. Link's Awakening, if you don't know me, if you haven't heard me talk about this before, it is my favorite game of all time. Even before the remake came out, the original Game Boy game was, or I guess the Game Boy Color game to a slightly more extent, was my favorite game of all time. And Link's Awakening on the Switch not only lived up to my expectations about what I wanted to see out of it, but exceeded them. It just added so much. Yeah, like Greg says, it was a perfect thing. Kind of leading into the next category and Greg's opinion on that, I do want to give an honorable mention to The Witcher 3, though, for reasons that we'll get into in just a second. So, hopefully I didn't spoil that too much. But biggest surprise, positive surprise, the thing that surprised us the most, the thing that we weren't expecting us to make the most happy, like last year, was Greg's pick was like Deltarune coming out. But for Greg this year, the biggest positive surprise was CD Projekt fitting Witcher 3 on the freaking Switch. Or at least whatever development team was able to make that happen. Yeah, that's a good point. That's why I wanted to at least honorably mention Witcher 3 for best port remake, because I'm fully willing to admit that I am not the biggest expert on The Witcher because I've barely played it. I played the Switch version of Witcher 3 a little bit, and I had fun with what little I played, but just seeing gameplay footage and whatnot from the original version of the game, it's nothing short of a miracle that they were able to get it on the Switch and able to get it to run as well as they did. That's really all I can say about that. My choice for biggest positive surprise of 2019 was when they announced Link's Awakening for the Switch. I don't go out of my way normally to watch Nintendo Directs or any of these like State of Play. I haven't watched State of Play before. I don't really care. I'll just read about it later when it pops up in what do you call it? Like on Nintendo Life or Push Square. That's mainly where I get a lot of my gaming news from. I don't bother watching directs or anything like that because I'm not as easily excited for things anymore. Greg, after the direct was done, Greg asked me if I had watched the direct, and I said no. I'll probably watch it later or look at the things. And he's like, you're gonna want to watch this, and I'm like, yeah, I'll watch it later. And he's like, they're remaking Link's Awakening, and I'm like, what? And I watched through the entire thing. I did see some things that did put things on my radar. I may still get Astral Chain at one point. And then, like, at the end, it showed the trailer for Link's Awakening, and I was like, hell yeah. And I was very excited, pretty much, like, all the way up to the release. So the next category we have is the biggest disappointment of the year. Basically, the exact opposite of the biggest surprise. Where, you know, things just don't always work out. And yeah. Greg got a little bit more general as far as the game industry was concerned. I went with something a little more personal and something that really isn't that big of a deal, all things considered. I mean, it may make some people mad if they're really opinionated, but I'll get to that in a second. So, Greg's choice for biggest disappointment, I'm just looking to see the exact wording here, Blizzard fucking over its Hearthstone players to appease China. Now, I'm not a political person. I mean, I know that I'll say that, I see myself as sometimes, if I do need to get political, I'm usually described as a libertarian. But for the most part, I don't like politics. I don't like discussing them with people because it just will make people angry after a while. That said, what Blizzard did, even from an apolitical standpoint, was a shitty thing to do. Extremely shitty. Here's this guy who, won... legitimately won of his own volition. It didn't cheat or anything. He won a Hearthstone tournament. And because he decided to make a political statement, in his case, free Hong Kong, obviously this was a Chinese-centric thing, and the government, being the way that they are, has complete control over their media. And, obviously, Activision Blizzard, having a high stake of Chinese money, much like a lot of media brands these days, wanted to appease China. So they took away his... I know I said I wasn't going to go into much detail about that. I actually mentioned this earlier, but they took away his prize money, and then apologized for it later. They basically said they were sorry, and that they wanted to use games to bring people together. But they didn't say what they were sorry for, outside of being very vague about it. That's all I got to say about that. But yeah, that was really shitty what they did. I personally wouldn't have called it a disappointment. This kind of behavior doesn't surprise me from a major publisher like Activision Blizzard. Especially one of the ones that's that high up on my shit list. But if I hadn't been in a position already to not give them any money, I definitely wouldn't now. That's all I have to say about that. Sorry, I went in that kind of a thing. Mine is a little bit more trivial. Mine's a little bit more of a personal disappointment. So I mentioned earlier that I played Final Fantasy VI. I initially wasn't planning on playing it that soon. I wanted to, play a whole bunch of other things in between, like put a little bit more space in between Final Fantasy games, especially with Shadowbringers coming out around that time. Shadowbringers, I think I actually played 6 around the same time I was playing Shadowbringers, and I had just beaten 5, and I was gonna save that for later. And I mentioned it to people in my free company Discord, and one of them said that, you should just really go ahead and play that now, because you're not doing yourself any favors by sitting on it like that. Now, so I go, okay, I'll play it sooner rather than later, and I did. Now, I will say that Final Fantasy VI is a mighty fine game. I am not going to say in any way that it is bad. It is very, very good. The story is good. Its characters are good. The music is phenomenal. Pretty much everything I care about in an RPG fits the bill. I'm not complaining about the game itself. It's just the hype surrounding the game. So many people everywhere are saying that Final Fantasy VI is the best Final Fantasy ever made. Final Fantasy VI, best game ever made. I'm getting a lot of... It sounds familiar. Sounds a little bit like Breath of the Wild to me. A game that I played when it first came out, and I don't think it led up to all of the hype. Despite being as good of a game as it was, I got a bit bored with it. And while I have still yet to get around to playing it again, I bought it again. I initially played on the Wii U, bought it again on the Switch. And I still do fully intend to give it another shot. But I didn't think it was the best Zelda game ever made when it came out. I didn't think it was the 10 out of 10 that everyone said it was. It's still a fine, good game as it is, but I've played much better Zelda games. And I felt pretty much the same thing about Final Fantasy VI. But probably the biggest problem I had was how it handled the protagonist characters. Because you have 12 or 13 characters total that you can play as. You can interchange them in your party and whatnot. Again, you have 12 or 13 characters, but the story only wants you to care about 3 of them: Terra, Locke, and Celeste. And I care about those characters. They are good, well-developed, fine characters. But I also wanted more character development for the other characters that I liked. I wanted more character development for Sabin and Edgar, because they barely got any. It was just... Their father had died. Edgar had taken over the kingdom as the heir. Sabin went off to train as a monk so that he could get vengeance on his father. They're reunited. They share a laugh, remembering things, and that's it. I mean, yeah, there was the bit with Figaro Castle being trapped underground, and Edgar disguising himself as a thief in order to, get an expedition party in to save the people inside. But there still wasn't a lot there. Cyan did have compared to many of the other side characters, Cyan did actually have a good amount of character development, even if it all just did revolve around his family being killed and him coming to peace with that eventually. It's just one story thing that's just stretched out over a long period of time. And it's a good story, but that's all it is. Cyan does grow as a character, but I felt like there was a lot more potential for him. I don't know. Maybe I'm just talking out of my ass. Maybe there's people gathering outside with torches and pitchforks. How dare you? Again, Final Fantasy VI is a fine game. I just don't think it's the perfect game that everyone says it is. My favorite non-MMO Final Fantasy is still Final Fantasy IX, which was a very good game that exceeded pretty much everything that I think that 6 did. And actually cared about giving all of its characters development, except for Amarant, but Amarant sucked anyway. So now that I've gotten that out of the way, that was my biggest disappointment, was that I went into Final Fantasy VI expecting the hype, and it did not live up to the hype. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, now that we've gotten our negative stuff out of the way, it's time that we come upon our final two categories. And I'm just going to put my phone off to the side here because I don't no longer need to look at that. So the next category is the best game that we played this year that didn't come out this year. Now for Greg, he does say it was Breath of the Wild. He really enjoyed it. So I don't know if I can really, expand on that really much. For me, the best game that I played that didn't come out this year was Mother 3. And there were a lot of games that I played this year that I really enjoyed. Yakuza Kiwami could have easily been up there. Illusion of Gaia could have easily been there. But I settled on Mother 3. Mother 3 has it's... First off, it was a good way of closing up, because I played the other Earthbound games. I've played Earthbound Beginnings, I've played Earthbound. And those are good. I mean, Beginnings maybe not so much, but it's still good, just not fantastic. Earthbound was fantastic, and I have been waiting to play Mother 3 for so long. And it's not like I was completely unfamiliar with it. Like, I watched Nintendo Capri Sun's gameplay, Let's Play of it like 10 years ago, and I loved it then. And to finally get a chance to play it, and it still holds up after all that time. The story is just superb. It still keeps the train running with its Earthbound-esque charm, and absolutely, if that game came out and my Game of the Year pick didn't, that would probably be Game of the Year for me if it came out this year and my other pick didn't. But my actual pick didn't. But yeah. So yeah, I'm really glad I picked it up. I'm actually glad I have it physically in my collection. So wins all around. So now here it is, the main event, I guess you could say. The moment you've all been waiting for. Squeeze the World's choices for Game of the Year 2019. And it is not Sekiro, unfortunately, for Sekiro fans. Hey, what games have I seen being treated as Game of the Year? Witcher 3 for the Switch, I think, has been considered one. A lot of people are saying Sekiro. Good choices for Games of the Year. Greg's choice was Death Stranding. And I know that I can't fully speak for Greg, but I know Greg had been looking, much like many Kojima fans, Greg has been looking forward to this game for years. And a lot of dead air to take out here. I'm just trying to put together words to express, like, based on observation and how Greg is, how I think he feels about it. Because obviously I can't fully speak for him, but I don't know. He had a really good time playing it with me when we played it on Twitch, and like every little thing, even the kind of stupid, shitty things, like one of my favorite moments in the when we played it on Twitch was when I went to take a poop. I made Norman Reedus go and take a poop, and an advertisement came up for the Ride with Norman Reedus show on AMC, which I'm fairly sure has actually been off the air for a couple of years by this point, but that just goes to show how long this has been in development. Just like the absurdity of it all, I think is a plus in my book. Just the whole the crap with the Monster energy drink. I mean, come on. I mean, the gameplay isn't 100% for me, but it at least kept me invested, and it kept me interested in seeing where the story went, and I think I might, at least watch someone else play it. Or maybe somehow find a way to carry on with my file. I don't know if I'd play it anymore on the channel or on Twitch or anything like that, but I can see why Greg likes it. So I think he's completely justified in saying Death Stranding is his game of the year. I remember when we first started playing it on Twitch, he actually said it was game of the decade. I don't know if that was hyperbole, if we actually meant that, but there you go. It's Kojima for Kojima's sake. And there you go. My game of the year should come as little surprise to anybody who's even watched this past special in earnest. And yes, my game of the year is Link's Awakening on the Switch, because it is my favorite game of all time. And it is continuing to be my favorite game of all time in its current form. And I, again, this is just tying back to like what I was talking about for best remake and biggest surprise. I fully went into this year fully expecting my game of the year to be Dragon Quest Builders 2. Then when I saw that they were remaking Link's Awakening, I knew at that moment. I looked at Dragon Quest Builders and I was like, sorry, old friend. But Dragon Quest Builders 2 was great. Shadowbringers was great, but Link's Awakening was perfect for me. And for all of the reasons I said before, all of the reasons I expressed during our playthrough of it, there really isn't anything that needs to be said. Nothing really I can say. It is my favorite game of all time, and thus pretty much had to win Game of the Year by default for me. And there you have it. So yeah, this is probably going to be my last video for 2019, honestly. I will start... I know I haven't even gone and done my LEGO Dimensions stuff. I'm like a week old on making progress on that LP. But when I get back from MagFest, I will start recording again in earnest. Hopefully we'll be able to get started with our main LPs again. I don't know if we're going to be continuing going Monster Great Adventure, if we're going to be playing something else with Greg. I do fully intend to complete the LEGO Dimensions LP, and I will be continuing on with that once I get back from MagFest. But until then, I hope you have a happy new year. I hope you have a happy holidays in general. And I will see you in 2020. So until then, for Soylent Greg, and Squeeze the World in general, I've been Captain Floofers, and I'll be here next time. Join me, won't you?